Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the movie Mindcage with director Mauro Borrelli. And I wanted to start by talking about your collaborative relationship with the screenwriter Reggie Kiyahara, because the two of you have collaborated on multiple projects in the past, and this is him writing the script and you directing it. And so how did the fact that you've worked with him and collaborated with him so closely before as a director and as a writer influence the way that you started to think about how you wanted to tell the story on screen as a filmmaker?
Yes, exactly. We work on a few projects before, and we also have some other project in development that we have been working, and likely will be, maybe in the future we will do those. But this started with an idea of aiming to a detective story, because the genre is very commercial, so maybe very viable for a large audience. And I've been always fascinated with film noir or Hitchcock or even David Fincher 7. I really like the tone. And there was a movie in the past years ago called The Year of the Dragon that I really like, with Michael Cimino did with Mickey Rourke. And so that was an element that we start with. And the second one was my fine art background. I want to find an opportunity to use some of the my background, and which I'm familiar with, which is art and painting. And then the supernatural element, because I can't resist to put a little of a fantastic element into even an action film. I have to do that. That's why I'm a big fan of Guillermo del Toro. When he did a Pan Labyrinth, there's always a little bit of fantastic on his work, and so we start with those three elements, and we come out with the idea: what if there is a serial killer that is also a painter, and is obsessed with his painting, and maybe he's committing crime through painting? There was a story years ago that I had that I kind of abandoned, but it was an inspiration for this one. It was basically a story of a painting, a 15th century painting, like a Bosch, let's say, that framed in a certain way, it was opening a portal to hell. And then I thought, God, I want to make that movie. I want to have what if hell, the gate to hell is a painting? And that idea was in my head, and kind of recycled this, and then it became obviously a completely different movie. But those are the inspiration. So the way we work together is that we work on the premise a lot, and we try to verbally make the story. So I try not to write anything until I have a pitch, because as soon as I put something on writing, I get in love or I get stuck with that. So, but the Latin, they say verba volant, like the word flies, so you can change all the time because you're not locked into that. So we started with a pitch and trying to make the story verbally, and then we put down an outline, and of course we work with all the structural rules that we have now these days. And then Reggie come out with the first draft from an outline, and then I make my notes, and then we go back and forth, and and so finally, and the movie that actually you saw has a lot of elements that are different from the script, because contingent reality sometimes forces you to do changes, especially when the story was originated, we were thinking something that take place in New York or Chicago or maybe Toronto, Montreal, a city where it's often rains, and with the fog and with kind of heavy clothes, and that kind of depressive film noir type of environment. And then for logistic, budgetary, and we end up to do in Northwest Arkansas. And I'm like, oh, how can I make that movie? So instead to try to make that movie, I tried to see what can I do in a place like that? And I look at the True Detective series, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe this is going to be the gothic, warm, people sweating, mosquitoes in, a different feeling, but maybe it's also good for a thriller of this type. So, so you have to always to change something.
Yeah. Yeah, and you were talking there, bringing up your background in fine art, and you studied in fine art and worked in that realm before even stepping over into working in film and in production design and as a concept illustrator. And so through that, in telling a story where your central character, one of the central characters is John Malkovich's character, the artist, and we see how he sketches people, how he sculpts, and so art really plays a huge proponent in the visual telling of this story. How did all of that extensive background and experience that you have in the art world and in the art side of filmmaking shape the visual details of this film, because they're so meticulous, the same way that his character is so meticulous with detail?
Well, pretty close to some of my kind of a background experience too, First of all, I see the great master which I admire in painting. They were like 15th and 16th century and 17th century, mainly 16th century. And their work was religious iconography. And through those religious painting, they were expressing the best of their skill and their art. And so that's what I was doing. I was like working as a kid. I was going to a monastery with a monk, learning about restoration and painting actually in the actual churches. And there is some horror element also in those religious paintings, because sometimes you see crucifixion, decapitated people like Salome with the head of Batista, for example, some head chopped into a plate, And I remember as a kid going into a local church. I was like 8, and a bunch of kids like running, and then we sneak into the church, and we all go to the end of the church, and there is a chapel, and there is a very dark painting of Jesus with the crown, and we all sit there watching, and it's almost dark. You don't see because the candle smoke, right? And at a certain point, somebody say, "He moved his eyes, he moved his eyes," and we all ran out. And I feel like, wow, how creepy can be that, and somehow I always got that in the back of my head. It's like I want to make a painting where angels, which are beautiful, can also be scary. And maybe the audience that they don't have that European culture background, and but they probably will still sense some mysticism and some kind of weirdness in that, So yes, the painting has an influence. And in fact, I reunite with two now great and famous artists in Italy, Nicola Verlato and Roberto Ferri, which they did some of the painting that you see on a film, and which I was working growing up as a kid and in the same studio and wanna be painters. And then I came to Hollywood and ruined my life while they're still happy painter, So, but we reunite on this film, so they provide some of those painting that you see.
That's amazing. I love that detail of coming back together with them. And in talking about building some of the suspense and the tension, there's this real cat and mouse dynamic between Mary, which is Melissa Roxburgh's character, and John Malkovich's character. And the way that you've used the camera, it feels like it comes closer to whichever character has the upper hand at certain moments. And there's the added challenge of having them have all these conversations in a very confined space, because John Malkovich's character is incarcerated, and yet the scenes still feel very dynamic in the way that you've allowed them and found different ways to move around a very limited space. And so how did you want to use the camera and the blocking of scenes to really create a lot of suspense and tension and different moments where it swings back and forth on who has the upper hand at any given moment?
Right. Well, first of all, I started with designing that prison cell, because if that cell was a real cell, it could have been impossible to do what we wanted to do. So you have to be exaggerate bigger than a real cell, and had to have a space that you can move around. So we built that. I sketched that, and then Nava, our director, was able to build that, and we built on a stage of a theater. Actually, that set is inside a theater. So I thought when Malkovich came, I thought he was happy to be on a stage while he was doing a movie. Because he's a theater actor. So that was designed also planning certain movement, because I know the risk was to make a claustrophobic film, and I didn't want that. So the whole wall of the cell, around the cell, are green, and if you see, Malkovich is dressing with a really dark, bloody red uniform, and she's like always on the green and gray, and her background is red, the same color of the. It's almost like, all right, if the devil is Malkovich, and he's inside this kind of a greenish prison, maybe she's the angel greenish one into the hell around her. So something that maybe subliminal will affect, but maybe you don't. It's not easy to notice. And in terms of blocking, well, first of all, to give the sense of danger. I had to rely on the ability of John Malkovich of being manipulative, because manipulation was the only way to make him scary. Because behind the cell, what can you do? So, but if you're manipulative and smart and anticipate her talking, or you jump into her talking in the right way, you create some anxiety and some, you become like an opponent. And the camera blocking, and that was, we set up 3 or 4 different type of light. So during the story change, and so it doesn't feel like the same place. I like the idea that the camera moves as the actor moves. Now, we didn't succeed on that, in doing that all the time, because it will have required much more time for shooting. But when I had a chance, I like the camera move while the actor move, and stop when the actor stop. So the audience start to connect the camera movement with the actor. So it's not a subjective movement. It's not like some kind of third party watching around and spying around, but she's actually moving the camera. And so when that was possible, I was doing that. Again, if I can do that all the time in a movie, I will do all the time, but it takes, really extra time.
And obviously one of the aspects of a film like this is making sure that the audience have just enough information to start pulling pieces together. And so that when they find out the answer to who has been committing all these crimes and these murders, that it makes sense in how it was pieced together, and they feel like, they really got this complete story. But also, you never want to give too much, because you don't want them to figure it out too early. And so how did you go into telling this film and finding that answer for yourself in every single scene of what details do we want to give them? What are some details that will make sense once they get to the resolution? And how do we make sure we're never giving them too much?
Well, sometimes you want to shoot more and then take it out on editing and make the judgment after, because then if you need it, you don't have it. But if you have it, you can take it out. I know that Reggie, more than me, he likes the idea that people watch the movie 2 times and go to check, and they say, did you see that? I'm not a big fan of that. I think when you watch a movie, that you consume it, that's it, you know what I mean? But, I know there's an audience that like to go back and figure it out. There was a little clue there, that we didn't see it, So we did disseminate several clues. And actually, the original screenplay was more articulated in that sense. There were more sense that the homeless guy was the killer, or maybe the doctor was the killer, or maybe this other guy was the killer. So everybody were potential killers, and we were putting clue all the time. And at the end, some kind of they're being disregarded because it become too, you lose the flow. But Yeah, I noticed that we have like maybe a couple of millions of view on the trailer already, and I've been just scrolling through some of the comments, and everybody thinks they know the end of the movie. They know, and I think they will be surprised because I don't think anybody's guessing it. I can tell the commune things, lead them to think certain things, but I think they will be a little surprised. They will be a little surprised that they don't expect.
Yeah, I definitely didn't figure it out, but I very often don't. And when you're in that location where it's kind of, again, like that cat and mouse in a different situation, Mary and Jake end up in this room that's full of plastic tarps, and there's, writing on the wall, and we see in the trailer that there's images of Mary from her life, so she realizes that she's been watched and she's part of the game as well. How did you come up with the design of what you wanted that space to look like? Because similar to the prison scenes, that's a space where you move the camera around a lot and really carry the audience into all the different corners of what she can see and when she can see it.
Yeah. That place was actually a real place. The mall condemned, basically, that was under a courthouse in Fayetteville. And the courthouse actually was used to do the police station. When you see that beautiful police station with a beautiful fresco, that's actually a courthouse. So we built a little office inside and dress up. And then I check the basement and I see all this, we just had the tarps, obviously. And when we shot on the location with the actors, we were limited to basically to do the action and the performance. And we had to skip all the preparation, what the killer does with the little, when he built the wings, when he does all the details. So I kind of end up not to have those when we shot there. And I was really regretting that we didn't have the time to do it. And I'm like, it was torture. So my house actually has a very nice basement. And that is a walk-in basement, which is very rare in Los Angeles. And so I kind of rebuilt in my basement the tarps and the things, and I did the wings there, and I did all the detail. So sometimes a movie can be, sometimes detail, like there were like a Visconti, an Italian director, that was really say that the movie value is in the detail. And so I thought it was important to go from big to the very small. So with my DP friend, we came here and in my basement, and we did all these little tiny things that happen in the basement, which actually I think I end up with a lot of those are in the trailer. So I mean, was a good choice.
Amazing. And you mentioned before that there was a risk that you could have ended up telling the story in a way that felt very claustrophobic. And so how did you find a way to tell this story that builds all of the suspense and builds all of the tension that you need for this sort of thriller and this sort of drama without it ever feeling too claustrophobic for the audience?
Well, like I say, changing light, for example, and having something a second level always, when you have a prison bar and then you have something on the back and there's something else in the back, that help a little bit. And also using wide lenses, so you get a little bit more breathing. I'm not a big fan of they used to call those TV shot, not anymore, because TV now is amazing, it's like cinema. But I didn't want to be on a close-up too much. I want to have space. And that helps a little bit, and intercutting those scenes with some exterior also helps. Sometimes you just, I went to Chicago and also in Los Angeles, and with my friend there, we did some drone view, and just sometimes inserting a view of the city from above, just to give you that little moment of, you relax your mind, yeah.
And there's scenes and moments where we step outside of the narrative of Mary trying to solve this crime. And, there's different moments where we see the killer in motion. So we see little elements and little parts of how they're setting everything up. There's a couple of flashback sequences with John Malkovich's character to his childhood, to his younger years. There's a moment
one of my favorite part there.
I love that. And even seeing one of Mary's dreams. And so how did you want to use those scenes as well, those sorts of scenes as well, to really take us outside of the linear narrative of Mary trying to solve the crime and add different types of visual elements as well?
Well, I thought, like many filmmakers, they're resistant to flashback. They think is, like in the 70s when you do use the zoom, you know what I mean? I think they're good tools, because they open a window in the mind of a character. And if I can see how John, if I can create some empathy for John Malkovich, showing the reason why he's doing what he does, and see why he likes the painting and why, again, if you want to learn how to be a good painter, and you want to use the academic teaching, you go to Leonardo, Raffaello, Tiziano, those. And what did they paint? They paint the religious images. So I think he was obsessed with the painting, but because he has to paint religious images, religion started to go into his head, almost like he couldn't distinguish anymore from the painting and religion. And then he started to create an excuse for feeling special or gifted, and he took the wrong way. He took the wrong direction. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask about your collaboration with the cast in the film as well, because I believe you also studied acting at one point, in addition to everything else that you've become such a master of over the years. And so how has studying the craft of acting influenced the way that you tend to work with actors? And, particularly when you have a cast like this on the film and you're working with someone like John Malkovich, who comes with so much experience.
My experience is bigger star and better actors, easier to work with them. The hardest one are the most amateurish, but the good one, because they went through so many things, like John was such of a kind, humble professionist, that was fantastic. No, my acting, I was, I was in San Francisco for a few years working for Zoetrope, working with Mr. Francis Coppola. And he told me, Mauro, if you, think about want to direct, maybe you should know what an actor feels, what an actor goes through, So there is a good school here. It's called Jimmy Shelton, it's in San Francisco. So I say, why don't you take some classes there? So I went for a year there. They were doing Stanislavski method, which is the base of method acting, basically, and theater oriented. So you had to do all this exercise, the mirror, the animal, all that. But I thought, like, wow, that's very interesting. If one day I have to talk with an actor, maybe I know a little bit of what they do when they go to a class, because everybody went to some class first of the, yeah.
That's wonderful. And when you were editing the film, you were talking about the post-production a little bit before. What were some of the scenes that were a little bit more challenging to find the dynamic of, or to find the specific pacing of how you wanted to intercut between different camera angles and different takes?
Well, sometimes the painful part on editing is when you don't have enough footage, because more footage you have and more you can tell the story in a different way. When you're limited to only a few shots and few performances, you feel that's where you suffer a little bit, and then that's the regret comes. Oh, anyway, but there was a part in the central part, one of the central part of the film, where, because some contingent situation that we had to deal with, we had to break down the whole sequence in 3 different scenes instead to be one big place. And so connecting all those story pieces, we go from a bookstore to a conference with a book signing, and then we go to a museum. Before, it was all in the screenplay, that was a paranormal, it was a library specialized in exorcism, paranormal, voodoo. It was a how you call those library, the bookstore where psychic bookstore where they have all this weirdness, right? So there was this place, and Martin Lawrence in the script was even more than what you see in the film, was obsessed with looking for answer into the metaphysic, into the world of the metaphysic and paranormal. And he didn't want anybody to know because he didn't want people making fun of him. But he had this secret life where he goes and explore the paranormal. So he goes to this club and this bookstore where they're all like him. You know, they do meeting with exorcism, they do voodoo, they do that. And at a certain point, he decided to bring Melissa to see what he's learning, you know. And Melissa is completely the opposite of him. She's not a believer. He's a believer because what he went through with the first arrest of the artist. So his mind was like looking for answer. And she's a non-believer. So he bring her to his world, and that's where they have like a big fracture. So that whole part was condensed into a very organic location, and we couldn't find, and then we end up to separate the location 3 different people. So that's something that if I go back, I will redo it. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I really enjoyed the experience of watching the film. So congratulations on everything with it. And thank you so much. So appreciate hearing all these wonderful details about it today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.